have increased, and the president is accused of embezzling millions of dollars from state coffers. Now Deco is calling on people to unite against the president. Among the protesters are teachers who have not been paid for months, displaced families fleeing the violence, and the political opposition accusing the president of cheating during the last parliamentary elections. As a response, Keita says he's willing to dissolve the newly appointed National Assembly, and he's offering a pay rise to teachers. He's also calling for a unity government to address the growing discontent.
Hello, family, and welcome to African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tony Cherie. If you have been paying attention to the news in Mali, you know that Mali has been occupied by French soldiers for a long time, and the people have essentially had it up to here with the French occupation of Mali, with the Malian president basically being a French satellite and not representing the interests of the people. And what we're seeing again in another African country is the people beginning to come together and to revolt against colonial rule. So let's go to Mali and see what exactly is going on there. I am reading from an article on the World Socialist Web. It says tens of thousands rally in French-occupied Mali for the resignation of the president. Tens of thousands demonstrated at Independence Square in central Bamako, the Malian capital, on Friday to demand the immediate resignation of French-backed President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. It was the second mass protests for the removal of Keïta this month after tens of thousands of people demonstrated on June 5th. The protests have been called by the official bourgeoisie opposition coalition, which has named itself the June 5th movement, rally of patriotic forces, many of whose leading figures are either former government figures or supporters. The widespread and growing demand for the removal of the government in the population, however, is driven by anger over rising inequality exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic, the decline of social services, corruption in the government's role, and the sectarian killings and extrajudicial executions by security forces backed by the French-led occupation. The president became president in 2013, and he is closely associated with the French intervention in the country. The protesters carried signs including IBK, who is the president, resign, the dictator will not stay, as well as banners calling for the release of political prisoners, more money for education, and an end to the coronavirus. A protester said that we should not come here because there is the coronavirus. The president has promised a mask for every Malian, but no one here has received one. He is a liar. So we have come here to challenge this lie like all the others. A group of protesters with him added, we have had enough of it. We heads of families have not received wages for 3 months. So far, 109 deaths have been confirmed in Mali and 1,933 cases of the coronavirus have been confirmed. On June 9th, French media reported that the opposition leader Mahmoud Dicko had met with a group of unnamed international officials, including representatives of the United Nations in Mali, from the Economic Community of the States of West Africa and the African Union. The French government has not made any public statements, either supporting or opposing the protests against Keïta, but there is no doubt that it is actively intervening to ensure the continued defense of French imperialist interests in the geostrategically important Sahel region. French intervened in Mali in 2013 against separatist and Islamist forces who came from Libya in the aftermath of NATO's regime change war in that country in 2011. It has maintained more than 4,000 troops in Mali, increased to more than 5,100 since the beginning of the year, as part of an international coalition that includes, check this out, Germany, Canada, the United States. The article also notes that Mali is the third largest producer of gold after Ghana and South Africa, and that it borders Niger, where France has stationed military forces, including drone bases, from where it sources the majority of its uranium supplies required for nuclear power production in France. So, I encourage you all to read the whole article. But, this is just a number of instances of African people revolting against France. I actually covered Mali earlier in the year. And what we're really seeing is a rise of consciousness about not only the French presence in Africa, but about the relationship between African leaders and these neo-colonial forces, which is very encouraging for us, because the biggest thing that we have to do as African people is draw the lines and connect the dots, and essentially figure out that these leaders who we complain about are corrupt, these leaders who we complain about don't have the interest of the people, these leaders who we complain about are doing all types of wrongful things for the country, that has a direct correlation to the fact that there are neo-colonial states outside of the country that are not only supporting those leaders, but they are calling a lot of the shots. I think it's very significant that we should notice that there was a lot of silence from France with this. And this is very telling of how neo-colonialism operates. It's not going to be out in the open. You're not going to hear the French president come out, especially recently, because as we've seen, the image of France in Africa has taken such a hit in recent years. You know, people have been very loud about the fact that this colonial presence is not accepted, is not welcomed in Africa. And so because of that, you know, as colonialism always does, it tries to evolve with the times, it evolves with the situation. People are more angry now, and so we're not going to be outward, we're not going to go out and show our presence so clearly inside of the region. Instead, we're going to be calling shots behind the scenes. This is how France is operating. This is how Macron, the French president, is operating in Africa, given the growing sentiments that are anti-France. I thought it was very interesting that, you know, we have a coalition. Like we said, you know, people don't necessarily understand Pan-Africanism, but when you understand the fact that European states literally work together, as they said, it was the United States, Canada, Germany, all together, and France, doing things inside of France together as a military force. That's very significant for us to understand, because we have to get that these conditions that we're living in, they are completely conspiracies against our people. They're conspiracies with not just one country. It's not just France. France is being supported by the US. They're being supported by Germany. All these countries are coming together to get to the same end, and that is the occupation of these countries. That is the control of these countries, the control of the resources. The article, I like that it also noted the fact that Mali has a resource that is very valuable to France. Keep in mind, it said it's the third largest producer behind South Africa and Ghana. When you look at the other countries that colonized those countries, South Africa, of course, was colonized by England. In more recent years, it was colonized by England. Then you had Ghana, which was also colonized by England. So essentially, Mali is where France says, okay, this is our whole. This is where we have our largest stake inside of this particular industry. So it's very significant to France that they maintain their power in that region, because this is essentially where they're going to get their cut of the pie. So you know, this is very important for us to understand. Another thing I wanted to point out was that the article spoke about the imperialist conspiracy to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, which I've spoken against many times on this channel. I just want people to understand the reason why we have to call out colonialism, we have to call out imperialism, and we have to call out these things whenever it happens. You know, a lot of people, you know, might notice that Libya is not the blackest country in Africa, meaning there's not the most people who are African in Libya. However, Libya was a country that was one that was very clear that it was against colonialism, and very clear that it was against imperialism, and it stood up under Gaddafi. It stood up to the United States on a number of occasions, and that resistance, that willingness to defy the orders of the West, even whenever they were doing things that go against international law, that resistance was enough for France and the US to come together and say, we're going to do something about this guy. So that instance should have been a wake-up call to all oppressed people in the world, because that means that, you know, we have to anticipate this revolution in Mali is now at a threat, is now threatened, excuse me, is now threatened by what happened years ago in Libya, because the international community tolerated this completely illegal war, this completely illegal overthrow and regime change. The international community, including Africans, we tolerated it. You know, we didn't do anything to stop it, so it was tolerated. And because of that, now we have an imperialist presence, with what would have likely been an ally. Libya would have likely been an ally to the Malayan people, but now we have this imperialist presence in Africa, as it is all over Africa. And so now we are in this situation where, are we going to see the same thing happen in Mali? You know, have we changed anything as far as organizing, as far as building up some type of resistance to this happening again? And of course, we haven't. Now, the only thing that I think is keeping us right now from seeing a complete declaration of war against the Malayan people outwardly. You know, things are done under the scenes now, or behind the scenes now. The only thing that I think is keeping that from happening is the fact that France's reputation has taken such a hit. And if France were to be so bold as to come out and say, we are going into Mali and we're going to completely change this government, or we're going to completely put down this opposition, if they were so bold, the backlash that you would see against France, the vitriol, the hatred that you would see unleashed would be probably something unlike we have seen in recent years from African people. So, you know, there are good signs here, and then there are things that we should learn about from the past. The good sign is that, again, people are pushing forward. We see a recognition of colonialism. We need to not just see it with France, but we have to see it with other countries. You know, I think more and more our sentiment is growing to where we recognize the colonization of Africa by China. We've recognized it with America, so more and more we have to recognize it. Because of that, our outrage has grown. We are no longer going to be quiet whenever things happen. We're no longer going to sit back and let things happen, but we have grown more vocal, and we've recognized to call it what it is. You are being a colonizing power in this country. It doesn't matter if you are officially colonizing this country. Your policies, your actions, your military rule tell us that you expect to remain in power over what is supposed to be a sovereign people and a sovereign nation. So these are good signs. But again, we cannot tolerate things like they're trying to do with the president, Maduro, in Venezuela. Is Venezuela a completely African country? No. Do they have significant amount of African people? Yes, like they do in many, if all Latin American countries have a sizable African population. The thing that we have to keep in mind with what is going on in Venezuela is that when these things are allowed to happen, when a country is allowed to say, we don't like your leader, we want to put another leader who's going to be more favorable to us, when they're allowed to do those things, they have drawbacks to all people who are oppressed. And so, like we said, we've seen that now because of what happened in Libya, our people are suffering because now they have more of an imperialist presence in that region. So we have to make sure going forward that we don't let these things slide. More and more, we're going to see more people come out, I believe, particularly in the African continent. I really believe that this is our time. This is our time to have more of a voice. This is our time to make more of a stand against imperialism and colonialism. And the more and more that we have people come out, the more and more you're going to try to see maneuvers in order to remove those people. So let's not forget the lessons from the 60s, the 70s, when we've seen a lot of our African leaders become assassinated or become overthrown whenever they stood up against these forces. So let's not forget that, and let's not even forget recent history. Let's not forget what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. Let's not forget these things, because if we forget them, then there's just bound to repeat itself. So promising things coming out of Mali. I throw my solidarity behind the people, and I hope all of you who watch this channel will do the same. So that's all I have on this topic. I will see you all on the next topic.